into this. Coalition governments have increasingly become a common feature in South African politics. In recent times, though, they have shown to crumble into chaos and instability. Now, Prof. Erwin Schwella from the Hugenote Kollege's School of Social Innovation will host a masterclass in coalition governance leadership tomorrow and Wednesday. And he joins us now from Cape Town this morning. Prof, thank you so much for your time and good morning to you. Quite an important conversation because we're all wondering if coalitions in South Africa are actually working.
Well, let me start with linking to your previous speaker and your previous news report. Coalitions are in many ways also a matter of life and death. If we think about it, if we don't get governance right, all of the service delivery issues will just worsen. And for governance to be properly done in the future, there is no doubt that the impact of well-managed coalitions will make a huge difference. So therefore, we are working with a group of very committed politicians. There are those in the South African situation from across the spectrum of the political formations. And tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we will be prototyping with these particular leaders a program which aims to improve the quality of coalition governance by means of looking at how we can set up successful coalitions and sustain those coalitions to create stability in governance and in that way also to improve service delivery, which, as I have said, is a matter of life and death. We are supported in this regard by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, a German foundation, and as you will know, coalitions are well known in Europe and also in Germany, and therefore we are proud to be associated with this program. We will involve academics, senior political leaders, and we are sure that these people will take their commitment seriously and we can help to improve the quality of coalition governance in South Africa, which is a matter of life and death.
Prof, I also understand that a tour by lawmakers is expected, if it hasn't been conducted already, this to Europe, just to study how exactly other countries have managed successful coalitions. So bearing in mind and yes, appreciating and acknowledging the inexperience that South Africa has when it comes to coalitions, but also using our local governments as a litmus test, where do you think lies the problem in terms of South African local politics not getting coalitions right?
Well, there are deep systemic issues. To start off with, democratic governments and especially constitutionally based rule of law governance requires a culture which links to excellence in both governance and service delivery and professionalism. In our case, this learning has to take place. We have a relatively short period of experience with coalition governments, and therefore we should expect it to improve. But it will not improve if we do not actively pursue the opportunity to improve it, and that is essentially a learning leadership approach. Secondly, over and above the deep systemic issues linked to culture and to politics and to power, there is also a lot of, shall we say, opportunism based upon taking political power and using that for perverse purposes, sometimes feeding the opportunity to, first of all, use the power for the party's purpose, and secondly, for personal purpose through some form of access to corrupt possibilities. So we have, therefore, a fractious set of coalitions, and we must work on those. To deal with this problem, we need deep structural change, which will probably require policy as well as legislative changes to make it more probable for success, as well as a change in attitudes, where the politicians are going to put their principles with integrity on the line and serve the people, not the party or their personal selfish interests.
Yeah. And I suppose that's also why, Prof, once again, you are conducting this masterclass to improve the competency of leadership in coalitions, right? But I have to admit, I almost had a chuckle when I read an article where you were quoted as saying, and I thought this was actually very true, you say that you're hoping for a healthy rush to college doors as opposed to courthouse doors, because that's what we've been seeing, right? Different political parties continuously taking each other to court because they are focusing more on their own interests as parties and forgetting more about the residents and service delivery. But I suppose it's due to that lack of understanding, that experience, that background, that academic background in terms of how coalitions actually can produce competent leaders. So I have to admit there, I had a good chuckle because I thought to myself that could save us a whole lot of, taxpayers' money, but also it could probably be more effective than heading over to courts.
Well, in this case, the pun was intended, and I'm very glad that you picked it up. In teaching, I like alliteration because it obviously helps the students with some, as it were, memory hooks. We need to build individual leadership competencies as well as institutional capacity, because it's of very little use if we have leaders with some competence, which we don't necessarily have, and there is not institutional, as it were, carrying capacity for what needs to happen. So therefore, it's a dual responsibility. The institutional capacity relates to the extent to which these initiatives can, as it were, bear fruit in the institution, and that calls for a cultural change, a strategy change, an attitudinal change across the institutions, therefore all local governments in South Africa. And then individual leadership competencies, which has to do with a service ethos, service leadership, which has to do with integrity, which has to do with serving the people rather than serving the self. And all of these things have to be built over time. Now, what we are doing tomorrow and the day after tomorrow is we're involving all of these political leaders in the college room, and we hope it will not become politically contested. We will manage it in that way. And these are serious people and also good political leaders. There are many of them around. And the intention is to prototype the course and then rebuild it for a massive rollout in the future in a program and maybe a center or a institute for coalition leadership governance in South Africa.
Yeah, well, of course, Prof, I mean, I can only wish you the best in terms of that masterclass. And if it's also open to the public, it would be quite informative, because oftentimes when you vote for a political party, you equally vote against a political party. So that understanding about coalitions is not only beneficial to political parties, but to the voters as well, so they can know what to expect when there are coalitions. Unfortunately, due to time, I have to leave it there. But thanks, Professor Erwin Schwella, for joining me right here on Newslink, talking more about a masterclass expected tomorrow and Wednesday. In terms of creating more cooperation in this symbolic South African political coalition state that we find ourselves in today. We can see this with the different metros and what's currently happening there with very short-lived, coalitions that are not always productive. And this masterclass hoping to produce more competent leadership in an age of coalition.